While asking for spare change, two adopted twins tell their beggar mother, "Look, Mom, that young billionaire has the same face as us." When she looks more closely, she's shocked and simply can't believe what she sees. "Spare some change, please. Any help is welcome." Marie's voice was soft, almost a whisper, as she held out a small plastic cup to the hurried passers-by on Fifth Avenue. Next to her, 4-year-old twins Thomas and Lucas looked hopefully at each person who passed, their big brown eyes shining with a heartbreaking innocence. Heartbreaking to those who allowed themselves to look. "God bless you, ma'am," Marie murmured to a businesswoman who dropped some coins into the cup without breaking stride or making eye contact. The metallic jingle made the twins smile. They knew that sound meant the possibility of warm bread for dinner. "Mom, look, that lady left a lot," Lucas exclaimed, peering curiously into the cup. Thomas, always quieter than his brother, just smiled and continued his task of organizing the few coins they'd collected into small piles on a piece of cardboard. Marie adjusted the makeshift sign she held in her other hand. "Help a mother and her children. We need food. God bless you." The letters, written in a nearly dried-out permanent marker, were beginning to fade but still served their purpose. She knew her presence there, with two small children, made many people uncomfortable. It was easier to ignore a lone adult asking for money than an entire family. The late afternoon sun began hiding behind the skyscrapers when the bell of the luxury boutique next door sounded. Marie didn't even look up. People leaving high-end stores rarely bothered to notice her. But then, something extraordinary happened. "Mom! Mom!" Thomas, normally so quiet, tugged at her sleeve with unusual urgency. "That guy has the same face as us." Marie glanced up, more to calm her son's sudden excitement than out of genuine interest. That's when her world stopped. Emerging from the store, a young businessman in a pristine Italian suit checked his latest model phone. It wasn't his elegant appearance that paralyzed her. It was his face. It was as if she were looking at an adult version of her children. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same facial structure. Even the slight frown of concentration was identical to Thomas's whenever he counted coins. "It's true, Mom. He looks just like us." Lucas was now pointing too, accidentally knocking over some of the coins his brother had carefully arranged. Marie felt her legs weaken. The cup of coins trembled in her hands, some falling and rolling down the sidewalk. The twins ran to retrieve them, but Marie hardly noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the young man, now heading toward a luxury car parked nearby. "Paul, the car is waiting," a voice called from inside the store, and the young man nodded in acknowledgement. Paul. Marie etched the name in her memory as if her life depended on it. Her legs felt glued to the ground while she watched him walk away. The twins, still fascinated by the resemblance, waved excitedly, even though the stranger hadn't noticed them. "Spare some change, sir," Lucas tried out, his childish voice rising above the street noise, but Paul was already too far away to hear. Marie observed the scene as if in a trance. The resemblance was too unsettling to be mere coincidence. It was like someone had taken her boys and projected how they would look 20 years from now. Same reserved smile, same confident stride, even the way he ran his hand through his hair. "Mom, you dropped your sign," Thomas gently noted, picking up the piece of cardboard from the ground. Marie hadn't even realized she had let it go. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold it again. The black Mercedes was long gone, carrying away the mysterious Paul, but leaving behind a completely transformed Marie. As she held her children, her precious boys she'd found abandoned 4 years ago, she felt the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions on her shoulders. "Will he come back to give us change, Mom?" Lucas asked innocently, still gazing in the direction the car had driven away. Marie swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "I don't know, my love," she answered honestly, but she did know one thing. Nothing in her life would ever be the same after that moment. The sun continued its journey toward the horizon, and the lights along Fifth Avenue began turning on one by one. Marie gathered the last coins of the day, less than $10 in total. Under other circumstances, that would have worried her more. But now, her mind was elsewhere. As she packed her few belongings into her worn-out backpack, including the cup holding the day's coins, she made a silent decision. She needed to learn more about Paul. Not just for her, but for the two little angels fate had placed in her arms. "Let's go, my loves," she called to the boys, her voice steadier than she felt inside. "It's time to leave." As they walked down the avenue, now beginning to glow with city lights, Marie clutched the cup with the day's coins to her chest, her only link to the reality she had known until a few minutes earlier. But now, for the first time in a long time, the coins seemed less important. A new hope, far more valuable than any amount of money, had been born in her heart. Marie didn't sleep that night. Lying on the thin mattress she shared with the twins in a somewhat sheltered spot under a highway overpass, she watched her boys sleep while her thoughts kept returning to Paul's image. Thomas shifted in his sleep, his small hand instinctively searching for his brothers, a habit they'd had since they were babies. The distant sound of the first morning buses announced the start of yet another day. Marie rose silently. Years of practice had taught her how to move without waking the children. She organized the few possessions they owned: 2 backpacks with changes of clothes, documents carefully wrapped in plastic bags, and the boys' improvised toys, a collection of bottle caps they used like little toy cars. "Wake up, my loves," Marie whispered softly, stroking the twins' hair. "Time for breakfast." Lucas opened his eyes first, always the early riser. "Do we have bread today, Mom?" "Yes, we have a little left over from yesterday," Marie answered, pulling out what remained of the bread they had been able to buy with the previous day's coins. She carefully divided it into 3 pieces, saving the smallest for herself. As they ate, Marie was already planning the day. Thursday was the day to stop by the homeless outreach center, where they could shower and change clothes. More importantly, it was where Marie managed to keep the boys' documents in order, a crucial step against the ever-present threat of social services. "Thomas, Lucas, today we'll take a shower," she announced, watching their contrasting reactions. Lucas cheered while Thomas grimaced. "And then we'll go for our lesson." Lesson was what Marie called their educational walks around the city. She turned each walk into a learning opportunity. Street signs became reading practice, store windows became math lessons, and the city's sounds became exercises in music and awareness. "Mom, can we stop by that bookstore?" Thomas asked timidly. It was his favorite place, a small bookshop where the owner, Mrs. Clara, allowed them to browse children's books when the store wasn't busy. "If you promise to behave during bath time, we'll stop by," Marie bargained, smiling as she saw them nod energetically. The walk to the outreach center was like a well-rehearsed dance. Marie knew every street, every establishment that offered small acts of kindness. The local baker sometimes saved day-old bread. The newsstand owner let her read the headlines to stay informed. The cleaning lady at a nearby office building would occasionally sneak out soap or toothpaste for them. At the homeless outreach center, Marie supervised the boys' showers with meticulous attention, using the opportunity to check every inch of their bodies, looking for bruises, signs of illness, or anything that might threaten their health. "Look, Mom." I made bubbles. Lucas was playing with the soap, while Thomas concentrated on washing his hair by himself, always trying to show independence. "Great job, my loves. Now let's dry off and put on clean clothes." Marie laid out the changes of clothes she kept set aside for these occasions. Clean, well-kept clothes were her defense against suspicious looks and potential complaints to the authorities. After their showers, the daily lesson began. Today, she decided to focus on numbers. "Let's count how many red cars go by in 5 minutes, she suggested, turning their observation of traffic into a math game. "I saw 3, Lucas shouted excitedly. "4, Thomas corrected, always more precise. Marie smiled, proud of how much her boys were learning. Even without formal schooling, they absorbed knowledge like sponges. Thomas could already read a few words, and Lucas had a natural flair for numbers. The stop at the bookstore was always the highlight of the day. Mrs. Clara greeted them with her usual warm smile. "I have a surprise for you today," she announced, pulling a used children's storybook from behind the counter. "I was about to donate it, but I thought you'd like it." The boy's eyes lit up, but Marie hesitated. "Mrs. Clara, I can't—" "It's not charity, Marie," the older woman interrupted gently. "It's an investment in the future. These kids deserve their own books." Marie swallowed hard, accepting the gift. It was more than a book, it was dignity, a chance to give her children something that truly belonged to them. The rest of the afternoon was spent looking for a safe place to sleep. Their usual spot under the overpass wasn't always available. Other homeless folks sometimes got there first, or the police would clear it out. "Mom, can we sleep near that store again?" Lucas asked, and Marie knew exactly which store he meant, the same one from which Paul had emerged the previous day. "No, my love. We're going somewhere else tonight." Marie wasn't ready to return to that street. Her emotions were still running too high. They found shelter under an abandoned awning. Marie improvised a home with cardboard and an old sheet, making the frightening space into something almost cozy for the boys. "Story time," she announced, opening their new book. The twins nestled against her, their small bodies warming one another against the chill of the approaching night. "Once upon a time," Marie began, but her voice faltered as she saw a social services van creeping slowly along the street. Instinctively, she pulled the boys closer, her heart racing. The van drove on without stopping, but the fear lingered, the constant nightmare of any homeless mother. "Keep going, Mom," Thomas asked gently, his small hand grasping hers. "I want to know what happens next." Marie took a deep breath and continued the story, her voice regaining strength. That was what kept her going, these small moments of normalcy, of love, of family. It didn't matter that their home was made of cardboard, that their dinner was only a piece of bread split 3 ways, that their days were a constant struggle for survival. When the boys finally fell asleep, Marie stayed awake, as she usually did, keeping watch. Her thoughts drifted back to Paul, to the unsettling resemblance, to all the possibilities that one encounter might bring. But she pushed those thoughts aside. Tomorrow would bring another day of struggle, and she needed to focus on the present, on keeping her children safe, fed, and above all, together. She held her boys more tightly, silently giving thanks for another day together. In her hands, the new book, her latest possession, was a small victory against all the adversity they faced. And so, lulled by the sound of the city that never truly sleeps, Marie allowed herself to dream of a better future for her little family. Marie adjusted the cardboard that served as a mattress for the twins, her calloused hands moving carefully so as not to wake them. The night was unusually clear, with a full moon illuminating the streets of New York like a giant spotlight. Her encounter with Paul had stirred memories, bringing to the surface a past she tried to keep buried. Now, it overflowed in her mind like a river after a storm. 5 years earlier, Marie Oliveira was the sort of woman others envied. At 30, she was marketing director at Thompson & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious advertising agencies. Her office was on the 20th floor of a commercial building on Wall Street, offering a panoramic view she used to admire while conferencing with international clients. "Marie has the Midas touch," her colleagues would say, and it wasn't an exaggeration. Her ad campaigns often won awards, and her ability to turn average products into must-haves was nearly legendary in the market. Her most recent success had been a campaign for a cosmetics brand that tripled sales in just 3 months. Her marriage to Ricardo seemed straight out of a wholesome TV commercial. He was the financial director of a multinational firm, a charming and ambitious man she'd met at a corporate event. Their relationship was fast and intense. Within 6 months, they were married, to the delight of their middle-class families, who saw in the couple the embodiment of success. "You two are the perfect couple," her mother, Mrs. Helena, would say during Sunday lunches. "Ricardo is exactly the kind of man I always wanted for you." Their penthouse apartment in Midtown was the perfect backdrop for their seemingly perfect life. Designer decor, original artwork, a climate-controlled wine cellar stocked with international bottles Ricardo collected proudly. The parties they hosted were talked about for weeks in their social circles. Marie had everything planned. 2 more years focused on her career, then they would start trying for children. Ricardo agreed. He always agreed with her plans, always supported her decisions. He was the ideal husband, attentive, loving, successful. Until the night everything changed. It was a typical Tuesday, one of those nights when work stretches beyond normal hours. Marie was about to leave the office when she got a message from Ricardo. He had forgotten an important file at home and needed it for a meeting the next morning. "Sure, love. "I'll drop it off for you," she replied, adjusting her evening plans accordingly. The building where Ricardo worked was an imposing structure of glass and steel in the heart of the financial district. The security guard in the lobby, Mr. Joseph, knew her well from the many times she'd been there for corporate events. "Good evening, Mrs. Marie. Mr. Ricardo is still in his office. You can go right up." The floor was silent, only the emergency lights creating shadows in the empty corridors. Marie could have just left the file on his desk and gone home. That would have been the sensible thing to do. Later, in her sleepless nights on the streets, she often wondered how different her life would be if she had simply ignored the computer that was still on at Ricardo's workstation. But she didn't ignore it. Her eyes caught sight of numbers on the screen that seemed out of place. As a marketing professional, Marie had an eye for detail, for patterns, and those numbers didn't make sense. She sat in Ricardo's chair, his familiar scent still lingering in the air, and began examining the open files, spreadsheets with multi-million-dollar transfers to offshore accounts, names of shell companies, overinflated contracts, a complex network of corruption and money laundering spanning multiple countries. No, she murmured to herself, her hands shaking on the mouse. There must be an explanation, but the more she looked, the more evidence she found. The scheme was far larger and more intricate than it first appeared. It involved high-ranking politicians, influential business people, and figures that made her head spin. She left the building on autopilot, barely remembering to hand the file to the security guard for Ricardo. She drove home like a sleepwalker, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts and emotions. Ricardo arrived late that night, as usual. He kissed her on the forehead, thanked her for bringing the file, and mentioned how exhausting his day had been. Marie watched his every move as if seeing a stranger. How had she missed the signs? The secretive dinners, last-minute trips, phone calls at odd hours. The following weeks were a test in self-control. By day, Marie maintained her normal routine at work, leading meetings, approving campaigns, smiling for clients. At night, while Ricardo slept, she discreetly investigated every piece of information she could gather. The scheme was like a spider's web, with threads stretching across various sectors of the economy. Ricardo wasn't just involved, he was one of the principal architects, the man who designed the complex financial structures that allowed embezzled money to vanish into the global banking system. "You seem different," Ricardo commented over dinner about a month after her discovery. "Are you working too much?" Marie forced a smile. "Just tired. That new campaign is really demanding." He accepted the explanation easily. Ricardo always accepted her explanations, never questioning much. Now she realized it might have been because he himself was living a lie. The moral dilemma consumed her. Whistleblowing would mean destroying not only her marriage but the entire life she had built. It would mean betraying the trust of the man she loved, or thought she loved. It would mean becoming a pariah in the social circles they frequented. The decision came on a sunny Sunday, during a barbecue at her in-laws' home. Ricardo was playing with his nephews in the pool, his carefree smile lighting up his face. Marie was watching when her father-in-law, a respected businessman, started ranting about ethics in business. "The problem in this country is that some people are just too honest," he said, drawing laughter from the guests. "Sometimes you need to know how to play the game." That night, after everyone left, Marie sat in her home office. She created an anonymous email and began organizing all the evidence she had collected. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was firm. Before dawn, she had sent everything to the appropriate authorities. The police operation blew up like a bomb 2 weeks later. Marie was in a meeting when she saw, through her office window, squad cars converging on the building where Ricardo worked. Minutes later, her phone started ringing off the hook. The headlines were merciless. Executive leads billion-dollar corruption scheme. Operation Spiderweb arrests business people and politicians. Money laundering scheme moved billions over a decade. Ricardo was arrested in his office, handcuffed in front of his employees. Images of him, still in his impeccable Italian suit, being led to the squad car circulated on every news channel. The ensuing chaos was devastating. The firm where Marie worked lost major contracts due to its association with Ricardo. Clients wanted to distance themselves from the scandal. Her position as a director became untenable. "Marie, you know we love you," her boss said the day he fired her. "But we have to distance ourselves from anything connected to this case. It's just business, nothing personal." Ricardo's family, once so welcoming, became hostile. Her mother-in-law, Sark, who used to treat her like a daughter, now accused her of not having seen the signs, of not protecting her son. "A real wife would have noticed," she said during a tense visit to the law office. "A real wife would have covered for him, protected the family." Her friends, many married to executives involved in the scheme, stopped taking her calls. Invitations to social events ceased. The club where she was a member discreetly suggested she cancel her membership. The money, which once seemed endless, ran out quickly. The couple's accounts were frozen by the court. The apartment, which was in Ricardo's name, was seized. The luxury car, his anniversary gift to her, was gone too. "You can always come back home," her mother offered, but her tone made clear the disapproval. To Marie's traditional family from upstate New York, a divorced woman was already a shame, but a divorced woman of a criminal was even worse. Their support came with a condition. She had to forgive Ricardo, stand by him during the trial, be the devoted wife who visited him in prison and defended his innocence publicly. Her father even suggested she give interviews supporting Ricardo, claiming it was all a smear campaign. Marie chose her integrity, even if it meant losing everything. Her fall was rapid, from a penthouse to a rented room in a rundown boarding house downtown. From that room to a homeless shelter when the money ran out. From the shelter to the streets when the shelter's strict rules became unbearable. Each step downward was marked by the agonizing certainty that she had done the right thing, no matter how high the cost. On the streets, Marie quickly learned the unspoken rules of survival: where to find food, where it was safe to sleep, whom to trust or not. It was on a particularly cold July night, 3 months into her life on the streets, that her world changed again. The crying was so faint, she first thought it was a cat meowing. She was preparing to sleep in the gap between 2 commercial buildings when she heard it. Following the sound to a dark alley, Marie came upon a scene that would haunt her forever. 2 newborn babies, still with traces of the umbilical cord, wrapped in a dirty blanket and abandoned like garbage. "Oh my God," she repeated as she cautiously approached. The babies were tiny, identical, twins. They were cold, hungry, but miraculously alive. Her first instinct was to seek help. That was the right legal procedure. She knew she should call the police, social services, someone who could properly care for 2 newborns. But something stopped her. Maybe it was how the smaller twin grabbed her finger when she checked them, or how the other stopped crying as soon as she lifted him into her arms. Or maybe it was destiny's way of showing that sometimes you have to lose everything to find your true purpose. "It's going to be all right," she whispered, more to herself than to the babies. "Mommy's going to take care of you." The first weeks were a test of endurance and creativity that made her old advertising campaigns feel like child's play. Marie had lost everything in material terms, but she still had her intelligence, her knowledge, her ability to solve problems. She learned to improvise diapers from pieces of old clothing, discovering that soft t-shirts could become surprisingly effective diapers. She mapped all the local pharmacies that provided free formula samples for low-income mothers, creating a route to guarantee the baby's regular feeding. Thomas and Lucas, the names she chose in honor of her paternal grandparents, grew in her arms, defying all odds. Each toothless smile was a victory, each little milestone a miracle. Thomas's first tooth appeared on a spring night, followed the next day by Lucas's. They were always in sync. Their first steps happened in the corridor of a shopping center, where Marie sometimes took the boys on rainy days. Their first words were uttered under an awning that served as a temporary shelter. "You're crazy to keep these kids," other homeless people would say. "Social services will take them. You can't afford them." But Marie had found a new purpose. After losing everything by doing the right thing, the universe had given her a second chance, not at wealth or status, but at true, unconditional love. The challenges were endless and terrifying. There were feverish nights when Marie walked miles to find an emergency room that would treat the boys without proper documents. Days when she split a single piece of bread 3 ways, ensuring the boys ate first. The constant fear that someone would report them, that social services would separate them. But for every desperate moment, there were 2 identical laughs that made it all worthwhile. For every cold night, there were 2 warm little bodies curled up beside her. For every contemptuous look from passers-by, there were 4 little arms hugging her without judgment. Marie learned to see beauty where she once saw only misery. She turned adversity into life lessons for her boys. A piece of cardboard became an improvised chalkboard where she taught letters and numbers. Store windows became private museums where she explained colors, shapes, and art. The roar of traffic became a lesson in traffic safety. Mama, Thomas was the first to call her that, one cold winter morning. The next day, as always, Lucas copied him. It had always been that way, one following the other, completing each other, as if 2 halves of the same soul. The years on the street taught Marie more about love and dignity than her privileged previous life ever had. She learned that wealth isn't measured by bank balances, but by sincere smiles and tight hugs. She realized her old, supposedly perfect life was empty of true meaning. Sometimes, in moments of weakness, she wondered if she had done the right thing when she reported Ricardo. The answer always came in the form of 2 identical sets of eyes looking at her with unconditional love. Yes, she had lost a life of luxury and comfort. Yes, sometimes hunger gnawed at her, and the cold was cruel, but she had gained something far more precious, a real family. And now, 4 years later, fate seemed to be playing yet another trick on her. The encounter with Paul awakened questions she had long buried. The resemblance was more than coincidence. It was like looking at an adult version of her boys. Who had abandoned the twins in that alley? Why? And what was the connection to the young entrepreneur who seemed straight out of a dream or a nightmare? Marie watched Thomas stir in his sleep, his small hand instinctively searching for his brothers, a habit they'd had since infancy. Lucas mumbled something unintelligible but didn't wake. Even asleep, they were perfectly synchronized. "No matter what happens," she whispered to her sleeping children, "you will always be mine. Always." The city continued its frenetic pace outside, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath one of its overpasses. Luxury cars sped by, carrying people to their comfortable homes, their orderly lives. Marie no longer envied that reality. She had found her own kind of wealth. But the questions persisted, echoing in her mind like a never-ending refrain. Paul, the young executive with her sons' faces. A new crossroads loomed before her, as significant as the night she discovered Ricardo's files. Once again, she would have to make difficult choices. Once again, she would have to choose between what was comfortable and what was right. But this time it was different. She wasn't alone. She had 2 little warriors by her side, 2 angels fate had placed in her arms on a cold night, turning her greatest tragedy into her greatest blessing. The moon remained high in the New York sky, a silent witness to another chapter of this improbable story. Marie knew her journey was far from over. In fact, she suspected a new and significant chapter was about to begin. She settled herself beside the twins, pulling the tattered blanket tighter around them to keep out the cold wind. Tomorrow would be another day of survival, of love. And maybe, just maybe, it would bring answers to questions she didn't even know she needed to ask. The sun had barely risen when Marie began rummaging through trash cans near newspaper stands. Years of living on the streets had taught her the best times to find discarded newspapers and magazines, her only window to the world beyond the sidewalk she called home. "Good morning, Mr. John," she greeted the news vendor, who knew of her interest in staying informed despite her situation. "Morning, Marie. I set something aside you might like." He handed her a business magazine with a knowing smile. "There's a big article about that businessman you asked about." On the cover, Paul's face stared at the camera with a confident smile. The tech prodigy. How Paul Montenegro revolutionized the market at 25. Marie's heart skipped a beat. It was her first clear photo of him since that day on the street, sitting on a park bench while the twins slept under the care of Ms. Rosa, an elderly homeless woman who had become a precious ally, Marie devoured the article. Paul Montenegro had founded his tech company at 20, still in college. An AI application that transformed corporate data management made him a millionaire by 23. Now, at 25, his company was valued in the billions. "I always knew I wanted to leave a legacy," Paul said in the interview. "My parents taught me the importance of making a difference in the world." Marie frowned. The article mentioned his parents, Fernando and Clara Montenegro, both professors. In the family photos, there was no obvious resemblance to her twins. How was it possible that her boys were the spitting image of Paul, yet had no apparent connection to their supposed grandparents? In the following days, Marie intensified her search. She carefully stored every publication mentioning Paul in a plastic bag, her improvised archive, guarded like a treasure. What she discovered was disturbing. Each new photo revealed more similarities. The way Paul ran a hand through his hair when thinking was identical to Thomas. The crooked smile Lucas gave when proud. Even his expression when serious resembled the boys' concentrated faces. "Mom, why do you look at those pictures so much?" Thomas asked one afternoon. Marie quickly folded the magazine. "They're about business, my love. Mommy likes to stay up to date." But the boy's perceptive eyes had already sensed something. "He looks like us, right? Like that day on the street." The innocent observation hit Marie like a punch. Her children might be little, but they weren't clueless. They saw the resemblance too, and that terrified her. The discovery that changed everything came one cold morning, hidden in the society pages of an old newspaper. A small note from 5 years earlier read, "Young entrepreneur Paul Montenegro was spotted several times with socialite Sophie Valentine. Close friends say their brief romance was intense." Sophie Valentine. The name sounded alarm bells in Marie's mind. Over the following days, she found more about her. A woman from a traditional family, same university as Paul, same social circles. But after 2020, precisely when Marie found the twins, Sophie practically vanished from public life. The coincidences were too many to ignore. The twins' ages perfectly lined up with that short relationship, Sophie's sudden disappearance. The eerie resemblance between Paul and the kids. With each new revelation, it felt like another puzzle piece sliding into place. "You seem different," Ms. Rosa observed one morning as they shared coffee. "What's been worrying you so much?" Marie hesitated. Ms. Rosa was her closest confidant on the streets, one of the few who knew her entire story. "I think I've found the boy's biological family," she finally confessed. The older woman fell silent for a long moment. "And what do you plan to do with that information?" That was the question haunting Marie day and night. What should she do? Paul seemed like a decent man, at least from what the articles showed. He had the resources to give the twins a life she could never hope to provide, a good education, comfort, safety, all that Marie dreamed of giving them. But then she remembered how she found them, abandoned in a dark alley, left to die. Who would do that if they had other options? And if Paul had known about the babies and chosen not to take responsibility? Or worse, what if he never knew anything and once he found out, tried to take the boys away from her? The doubts gnawed at her. Each of the twins' smiles now came with a twinge of heartbreak. Each gesture reminiscent of Paul was like a small prick to her conscience. She caught herself watching them sleep, trying to imagine what their lives would be like had they been born into wealth instead of cardboard boxes. One afternoon, she watched Thomas teach Lucas how to tie his shoes, a newly acquired skill, and realized she was crying silently. The boys, always so in tune with her emotions, immediately ran to hug her. "Don't cry, Mommy," Lucas said, his little hands cupping her face. "Everything's okay," Thomas added, his eyes, so much like Paul's, filled with concern. Marie hugged them both tightly, feeling the unconditional love they shared. These were her children, no matter what a DNA test might say. She was the one who'd soothed their fevers, taught them their first words, kissed their bruises. She knew their fears, their dreams, their every quirk, but she also knew that love didn't equal ownership. If Paul really was the father, she had no right to deny the boys this part of their history, even if it meant possibly losing them. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky orange and pink. Marie watched the twins playing with other children, their laughter echoing between the buildings. 4 years ago, she found 2 abandoned babies and chose to give them all her love. Now she had to make another choice, maybe the hardest of her life. She picked up one of the magazine clippings, once again studying Paul's face. The resemblance to her boys was like a mirror into the future, showing who they might become. "What would you do?" she whispered at the photo, as if it could answer her. "If you knew you had 2 wonderful kids living on the streets. If you knew there was a woman who loves them more than life itself, but can't give them everything they deserve." The photo remained silent, bearing only Paul's professional smile, frozen on glossy paper. Marie carefully placed it back into her plastic bag. She needed more certainty before making any decision that could affect her children's future. "Mom, can you tell us a story?" Lucas asked, coming back from his play. Thomas was already settling by her side, awaiting the evening ritual that ended all their days. Marie smiled, pushing her worries aside for now. The Paul puzzle would have to wait. At that moment, her children needed her, fully present, fully mother. The hard decisions could wait a bit longer. But as she told a made-up story about princes and adventures, her mind continued to work. She needed a plan. She had to find a way to discover the truth without risking everything she had built through so much sacrifice. Night settled over the city, bringing with it the usual chill of New York. Marie drew the twins closer under her protective embrace, as she did every night. But this time, sleep was slow to come. Paul Montenegro was no longer just a face in a magazine. He was a possibility for change, for answers, for transformation. He was also a threat to everything Marie loved most in the world. Soon, she would have to decide how to deal with that reality. For now, all she could do was hold her sons a bit tighter and hope that whatever she decided would be right for everyone involved. Rain fell mercilessly over New York that night, forcing Marie and the twins to take shelter under the old awning of a deserted store. The sound of water beating against the metal covering reminded Marie of another rainy night, 2 years earlier, when she almost lost her children for the first time. It was a night much like this one. The boys were running high fevers, and a desperate Marie took them to the nearest ER. The attending doctor, seeing 2 small children with a homeless woman, did not hesitate to call Child Protective Services. "Are these your biological children?" the social worker asked, her tone making it clear she already knew the answer. "They're my children," Marie responded, holding them close. "They're all I have." By some miracle, or perhaps because of the fierce determination in her eyes, they let her leave with the twins after their fevers subsided. But the warning was clear. Next time, it wouldn't be so easy. Now, watching Thomas and Lucas sleep peacefully, Marie felt the weight of that memory. It wasn't the only time she nearly lost them. There was the incident in the park, when a well-meaning police officer tried to help by taking the children to a shelter, and the time a wealthy woman offered to adopt them, promising them a better life. "A better life," Marie muttered to herself, her eyes on the magazine clippings about Paul she treated like treasures. He could give the boys everything she couldn't: education, comfort, security, a roof over their heads that wasn't a makeshift awning. Paul's face in the photos seemed to mock her. He was young, successful, respected. If he truly was the boys' father, how could she deny them that inheritance? "But what right does he have?" she whispered bitterly. "After 4 years. Marie spent the night awake, plotting. She knew where Paul worked, the imposing building in the city's financial district. She knew his schedule, thanks to the articles detailing his daily routine. She even knew that every Thursday he lunched at the same upscale restaurant. In the morning, she made her decision. She could no longer live with the doubt, the weight on her shoulders. She had to know the truth, no matter how painful. "Miss Rosa," she called to her friend as soon as the sun rose, "I need a very big favor." The older woman, who had known Marie for years, listened attentively to her plan. "Are you sure, Marie? This could change everything." "Everything's already changing, Miss Rosa. Since I saw him that day, nothing's been the same." Carefully, Marie explained to the twins that she had something important to do. "You'll stay with Grandma Rosa today, okay? Mommy will be right back." "Promise?" Lucas asked, his big eyes full of worry. I promise, my love. Mommy always comes back. Marie chose her best clothes, a pair of jeans without holes and a clean blouse donated by a volunteer. She washed herself thoroughly in a mall restroom as soon as it opened. She combed her hair, trying to look as presentable as possible. In her bag, she carried the articles about Paul, especially those mentioning Sophie Valentine. They were her only fragile evidence, but it was all she had. The plan was simple. Wait for Paul to come out for his usual Thursday lunch, catch him away from security and cameras, tell her story, and show him the resemblance through photos. She wouldn't mention the twins until she was sure of his intentions. If he really is their father, Marie thought, he has the right to know, but if he isn't, or if he has bad intentions, she let the thought die. She couldn't consider every possibility, or she'd lose her courage. The night before her planned meeting, Marie hugged her children extra tight. Memories of the past 4 years flooded her mind like a film reel. First smiles, first steps, first words. Cold nights when their little bodies were her only warmth. Mornings of hunger when their smiles were her only sustenance. I love you both more than anything in this world, she whispered to the sleeping twins. Everything I do is for you. Always was, always will be. The day dawned clear, as if the universe approved of her decision. Marie kissed her children, left them with Mrs. Rose's care, and headed to the financial district. She mentally rehearsed 1,000 times what she'd say to Paul. I'm not here to ask for anything, she planned to say. I just think you have the right to know. As she walked the streets that led her to her destination, Marie felt the weight of each step. She was about to change not just her life, but potentially her children's lives, and the life of a young man unaware of their existence. Paul's corporate building appeared on the horizon, its glass windows reflecting the morning sun. Marie paused for a moment, took a deep breath and continued. For better or worse, it was time to uncover the truth. God help me, she murmured, clutching the bag with her delicate evidence to her chest. Let me be doing the right thing. The clock showed 11:30. In half an hour, Paul would leave for his usual lunch. Marie would be there, ready for the encounter that could change everything, or destroy the little she had. 188. Chapter 7. The Inevitable Confrontation. Marie didn't need to approach Paul during lunch as planned. Fate, ever unpredictable, offered a better opportunity. The very next morning, while collecting discarded newspapers, she came across an announcement for a charity event happening that same night. Paul Montenegro would be one of the main donors. The event would be held at the City Museum of Modern Art, and Marie knew the location well. She'd often taken the twins there on free admission days. She knew every entrance, every exit, every corner of that iconic building. I'm going to need more time with the boys, she told Miss Rosa, modifying her original plan. Tonight could be more complicated. The afternoon was devoted to preparations. Marie cleaned up thoroughly in a public restroom, put on her best clothes reserved for emergencies, and even borrowed some lipstick from a volunteer who sometimes handed out food at the park. You look different, Thomas remarked when she came to say goodbye. Just for tonight, my love, she responded, kissing his forehead. Tomorrow I'll be the same as always. The museum shone like a jewel by the time Marie arrived. Limousines and luxury cars lined up at the main entrance, dropping off guests in formal attire. Marie, dressed in clean jeans and a simple blouse, clearly did not belong. But years on the streets had taught her how to be invisible when necessary. She slipped in with the catering staff, her confident stance preventing any questions. Once inside, she found a discreet corner where she could observe without being seen. Paul arrived shortly after 9, immaculate in a navy blue suit. Marie felt her heart race. Seeing him up close again only confirmed the extraordinary resemblance to her twins. The same posture, the same gestures, even the slight tilt of his head when listening to someone. For 2 hours, she watched him move about the event. Paul was clearly charismatic, navigating with ease among entrepreneurs and socialites. He smiled often, the same smile as Lucas. He ran a hand through his hair when nervous, exactly how Thomas did. Marie waited patiently. She knew that at some point he'd seek a moment of solitude, away from the fake smiles and superficial chats. Her chance came when Paul headed to one of the museum terraces, clearly seeking some fresh air. Taking a deep breath, Marie followed him. Now or never. "Mr. Montenegro," she called softly, keeping a respectful distance. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Paul turned, surprised. His eyes scanned Marie's simple clothes, clearly registering that she wasn't one of the guests. "How did you—" he began, but Marie gently cut him off. "Please, I only need 5 minutes. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just need to tell you something important." Something in her voice must have struck him because he relaxed a bit. 5 minutes, he agreed, glancing at his expensive watch. Marie pulled out the photos she'd collected, magazine cutouts, carefully preserved. "A few weeks ago, you left a luxury store on Fifth Avenue," she began. "You probably didn't notice, but there was a woman begging on the sidewalk with 2 small boys." Paul frowned, trying to remember. "I'm sorry, I see so many people." "No need to apologize," Marie continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But those boys, they noticed something that day. Something that's been haunting me ever since." She offered him one of the photos, an interview profile shot. "Look closely. Then, if you'd like, I can show you a picture of the boys." Paul took the photo, likely out of politeness more than curiosity. But then Marie mentioned Sophie Valentine, and his expression changed completely. "How do you know Sophie?" he asked, suddenly tense. "I don't," Marie answered honestly, "but I found some old articles about you two from 5 years ago. The timeline lines up with something I need to tell you." Carefully, Marie told him the story of that cold night when she found 2 newborns abandoned in an alley. As she spoke, she watched the emotions pass over Paul's face like storm clouds on a rainy day. "That's impossible," he muttered when she finished. "Sophie never... she couldn't..." "The boys look exactly like you," Marie continued quietly. "Every gesture, every expression. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but the more I observe them, the more certain I become." Paul leaned against the terrace railing, his face pale under the city lights. "You're telling me I have kids? Twins? And they've been living on the streets?" "I'm saying there's a possibility," Marie clarified gently. "And I thought you had the right to know." "Proof," Paul demanded, his voice hoarse. "I need proof. I can't just believe." "I have photos of them," Marie offered, but Paul raised a hand, stopping her. "No, I need time to process this. I need to talk to Sophie, understand." "How can I reach you later?" Marie hesitated. Giving him her address would expose the boys before she could be sure of Paul's intentions. "I'll find you," she decided. "In 3 days, at the cafe in that bookstore on Fifth Avenue. 10 in the morning." Paul nodded mechanically, still appearing in shock. "This is insane. You realize this could destroy lives?" "It's already destroyed some," Marie replied softly. "Maybe it's time to fix things." Before Paul could respond, voices approached the terrace. Marie took advantage of the distraction to slip away into the shadows, leaving behind a visibly shaken man clinging to the railing as if his legs might fail him at any moment. Her return to the place where Miss Rosa cared for the twins was a blur. Her mind replayed every second of the conversation, every expression on Paul's face. There had been recognition when she mentioned Sophie, guilt, or just genuine shock. The cold, early morning air in New York helped clear her thoughts. She had dropped a bomb into Paul's life and possibly her own. In the coming days, he would investigate, search for Sophie, maybe even hire private detectives. Marie knew she had crossed a line of no return. If Paul decided to fight for custody of the twins, what chance did she, a homeless woman with no resources, stand against a billionaire? But as she neared the spot where Miss Rosa was watching her children, another thought comforted her. She had done the right thing. The boys deserved to know their origins, deserved the chance at a better life. Thomas and Lucas were fast asleep when she arrived, cuddled up as always. Marie watched them for a long moment, memorizing every detail of their beloved faces. After that night, nothing would be the same. "Everything go okay?" Miss Rosa asked softly. Marie didn't know how to answer. She had managed to speak to Paul, yes, but all right was too optimistic for the whirlwind she had unleashed. "It happened," she replied simply. "Now we wait." She lay down beside the twins, pulling them close. The familiar smell of their hair, the warmth of their small bodies, the soft, synchronized breathing. This was home. For now, it was all that mattered. Tomorrow, with all its uncertainties and possible storms, could wait. At that moment, Marie just needed to hold her children and pray that whatever came of her actions would be for everyone's good. The city continued its nightly symphony outside, oblivious to the drama unfolding under one of its abandoned awnings. Somewhere in New York, a young billionaire was probably also lying awake, his life turned upside down by an unexpected encounter, and there, in her improvised nook, Marie finally let the tears flow, tears of fear, hope, and uncertainty. The dice had been thrown. Now all she could do was wait and see how they'd fall. Dawn found Marie still awake, watching the twins sleep. Her conversation with Paul replayed in her mind like an unending echo, every expression of shock on his face, every word exchanged. "Mom?" Thomas mumbled drowsily, his eyes opening slowly. "Did you sleep?" Marie forced a smile. "Of course I did, my love. I just got up early." It was a lie, of course. She hadn't closed her eyes, her heart torn between the certainty of having done the right thing and the terrible fear of making the biggest mistake of her life. Across town, in his penthouse, Paul had also spent a sleepless night. The half-empty whiskey bottle on his table couldn't erase Marie's words from his mind. "Twins," he muttered to himself, finding the word foreign in his mouth. How is that possible? His eyes scanned old photos on his laptop, images from 5 years ago he hadn't revisited in a long time. Sophie smiled in them, her face young and carefree, with no sign of what was coming. Their relationship had been brief but intense. Sophie was different from other girls he knew. Smart, independent, unpredictable. For 3 months, Paul believed he had found something special. Then, out of nowhere, she disappeared. She stopped returning calls. Messages went unanswered. Emails bounced. When he finally reached her parents, they just said Sophie had gone abroad to study. Was she pregnant? Paul wondered aloud, digging through his memories for any clue he might have missed. How could I not have known? Back under the awning, Marie prepared an improvised breakfast, donated bread and some milk she had procured the day before. "Mommy, you're different," Lucas observed as he ate. Even at 4, he was attuned to her changing moods. "It's your imagination, my love," Marie replied, but her heart squeezed. How would she explain it to them if Paul decided to enter their lives? How would she prepare them for such a big change? In his corporate office, Paul cancelled all meetings that day. His fingers flew over the keyboard, searching for any information about Sophie Valentine he could find. Her social media accounts had been abandoned for years. Her last public post was from March 2020, just days before she vanished from public view. A smiling party picture, with no visible sign of pregnancy. "I need more," Paul murmured, picking up his phone. Within minutes, he had mobilized his legal team and a private investigator, find everything about Sophie Valentine from the last 5 years, and check birth records for twins in New York during that period. Marie spent the day following her usual routine with the twins, or as usual as it could be under the circumstances. She led their lesson at the park, using trees to teach them about nature, cars to practice colors and numbers. But her heart wasn't in it. Every well-dressed person who passed made her tense. Every slow-moving luxury car made her want to grab the children and run. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked Ms. Rosa while the children played at a safe distance. "What if he tries to take them from me?" The elderly woman squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You did what your conscience demanded, Marie. Now trust God." Paul spent the afternoon reviewing old chats with Sophie, saved in his digital backup. There was no indication of a pregnancy, but now he noticed odd gaps. Periods of radio silence, last-minute cancelled plans, excuses that seemed flimsy in retrospect. "How did I not see this?" he repeated, guilt eating at him. If Marie was telling the truth, his own children, his flesh and blood, had spent 4 years on the streets. The thought was unbearable. Paul Chaix, who had always had everything, who had built a business empire, prided himself on his control over every detail of his life. Now he felt utterly lost. That evening, while the twins slept, Marie allowed her own doubts to overwhelm her. What if she was wrong? What if the resemblance was just a cruel coincidence? Or worse, what if she was right? But Paul decided he wanted nothing to do with them. "I can't lose them," she whispered into the darkness, holding her sons closer. In his penthouse, Paul was surrounded by papers, preliminary reports from his investigators, old records, photographs. One in particular caught his attention. He and Sophie at dinner, exactly 1 week before she disappeared. He scrutinized it as if expecting a hidden detail. Was there something different in her smile? A secret in her eyes he'd missed back then? The phone rang, making him jump. It was his lead investigator. "Mr. Montenegro, we found something." Sophie Valentine left the country in April 2020, but secretly returned 3 months later. She stayed in New York for only 2 weeks, then left again. Paul's heartbeat sped up. 2 weeks. When exactly? As the investigator provided the dates, his hands shook. It matched perfectly with the time Marie claimed the babies were abandoned. Under her awning, Marie tried to sleep, but rest wouldn't come. In 2 days, she'd meet Paul again at the cafe. What would he say? Had he found Sophie? Discovered the truth? "Mama," Lucas muttered in his sleep, snuggling closer. Thomas, on the other side, instinctively reached for her hand. Marie kissed each forehead, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. These were her boys, her life and her reason for being. The thought of losing them was like losing her heart. Paul worked through the night, organizing information, building a timeline. His analytical mind, used to solving complex tech problems, now faced the biggest challenge of his life. "I need certainty," he decided, looking out at the city lights through his window. "I need the truth before I make a move." The next day dawned cloudy, reflecting the emotional storm both Marie and Paul were experiencing. Marie continued her daily routine with the boys, each moment now weighted with the acute awareness that any hug or smile could be one of her last. Paul buried himself in his work, trying to maintain sanity while awaiting more information from his investigators. But he kept picturing the scene Marie had described, 2 of his children living on the streets of New York. That night, as the city prepared for sleep, 2 restless hearts remained awake, separated by miles and by entire worlds. Marie, in her little corner under the awning, prayed for wisdom and strength to face what was coming. Paul, in his luxurious penthouse, stared at an old photo of Sophie, searching for answers in her frozen smile. The day of their next meeting approached, bearing the weight of revelations that could change many lives forever. The truth, like a storm on the horizon, was about to burst upon them all. Paris was grey that autumn morning when Paul Montenegro stepped out of the taxi in front of an Art Nouveau building in the 16th arrondissement. His investigators had located Sophie Valentine in less than a week. She had lived there for 4 years, working as a curator at a small art gallery. Paul adjusted his coat, feeling the weight of the envelope in his inside pocket. It contained discreet photos of the twins his investigators had managed to get. He had spent the flight studying them, finding it surreal to see miniature versions of himself. The building's concierge asked no questions when he mentioned Sophie's name. His polished, confident demeanor opened doors. In the old elevator, Paul rehearsed for the 1,000th time what he would say. How do you begin a conversation about abandoned children with someone you haven't seen in 5 years? Sophie answered the door, still in her robe, her hair wet from a shower. Her face, still beautiful in her 30s, lost all color when she recognized him. "Paul," she whispered. May I come in?" he asked quietly, though his tone indicated it wasn't really a question. The apartment was small but elegant, decorated with the trademark good taste Sophie had always possessed. Framed modern art on the walls, neatly stacked books, a Siamese cat eyeing the visitor warily. "Coffee?" Sophie offered automatically, her trembling hands revealing her nerves. "I'm not here to socialize," Paul replied, pulling the envelope from his pocket. "I'm here because of them." The photos spilled out onto the coffee table like bombs. Sophie stared at them for a long moment, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Finally, she covered her mouth with her hands, a sob escaping. "So you found out," she finally said, her voice choked. "Not because of you," Paul said, unable to hide the bitterness. because of a homeless woman who found them in an alley. Who's been raising them for 4 years on the streets while you lived here? Sophie collapsed onto the sofa as if her legs could no longer support her. You don't understand. Then make me understand, Paul yelled, years of stolen fatherhood boiling in his voice. Explain how you could hide my children from me, how you could abandon them like trash. I was 3 months pregnant when we broke up, Sophie began, tears streaming down her face. I found out a week later. I tried calling you, but what? My parents intercepted everything. You know my family, Paul. The shame of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, and they threatened to disown me, send me to a convent. When they found out I was carrying twins, they became hysterical. Paul sank into the opposite chair, memories of that time flooding his mind. The unanswered calls he had assumed were just part of a painful breakup, the text messages and emails that went nowhere. They took me to our country house, Sophie continued, her voice distant as if recalling a nightmare. Told everyone I was studying abroad. I spent my entire pregnancy practically in house arrest. Why didn't you tell me afterward? Why didn't you reveal the truth later? Sophie let out a bitter laugh. You were starting your company. You were in every newspaper, on every magazine cover, the tech prodigy. What right did I have to ruin your dreams with 2 unwanted babies? Unwanted? Paul felt anger flare again. Who said they were unwanted? My depression told me so, Sophie said quietly. I started showing symptoms during the pregnancy. No freedom, no one to talk to, no support. I sank into a bottomless pit. She stood and went to a bookshelf. From inside a book, she pulled out a yellowed envelope. These are the only pictures I have of them, she said, handing it to Paul, from the day they were born. Paul looked at the faded images. 2 tiny, identical newborns. His children. A massive wave of emotion hit him. Love, rage, regret, all tangled. My depression got worse after they were born, Sophie went on. I couldn't look at them without feeling like a monster. I couldn't nurse, couldn't take proper care. My parents talked about adoption, sending them abroad. So you decided to abandon them in an alley. Paul couldn't hide the contempt in his voice. No, Sophie cried, then more softly. No. I planned to leave them at a hospital. I had everything arranged. But when I got there, reporters were swarming the ER. Some celebrity had been in an accident. I panicked. She paused, breathing hard. I drove for hours with them in the car, barely thinking straight. When I came to my senses, it was done. I convinced myself someone would find them quickly, that they'd be okay. And then fled to Paris, Paul finished. I checked into a psychiatric clinic first, Sophie corrected. Spent 6 months there. When I was released, it was easier to start over far away, build a new life, pretend that was just a nightmare. Paul walked to the window, the city's grey skyline mirroring his mood. He had often imagined reuniting with Sophie in his youthful fantasies of romantic reconciliation. Instead, he felt only anger and pity. Are they okay? Sophie asked hesitantly. The woman who found them, does she take good care of them? Better than both of us, Paul replied bitterly. She has nothing, lives on the streets, but she gave them all the love she could. Sophie started crying again, the deep, painful sobs of a person who had punished herself daily for her choices. I'm so sorry, Paul. Not a day goes by that I don't think of them, regret what I did. Paul turned to look at her. The determined, confident girl he'd known was gone, replaced by a fragile woman. Part of him wanted to keep shouting, demanding explanations for the stolen years. But another part realized she had already tortured herself enough. What are you going to do now? Sophie asked after a long silence. I'm going to meet my children, Paul said firmly. Give them everything they deserve, a home, education, love, and you. I don't deserve to be part of their lives, she interrupted sadly. That's not our call, Paul surprised himself by saying. When they're older, they can decide whether they want to know you. Sophie nodded, tears still flowing. Paul made his way to the door, but paused before leaving. Their names are Thomas and Lucas, he said without turning around. The woman who found them, she named them after my grandparents, not even knowing. He left the building in a daze, burdened by the revelations of the past hours. In the taxi to the airport, he looked again at the twins' photos. His children, abandoned but found, lost but loved. He had many decisions ahead, many bridges to build, but at least now he knew the truth. As painful as it was a beginning. Marie was feeding the twins donated bread when she got the message. An employee at a diner where she often asked for water called her over, saying there was an urgent phone call for her. "Marie?" Paul's voice sounded tense, even over the phone. "I just got back from Paris. We need to talk today." Marie's heart raced. Paris. So he had found Sophie. "The boys. They're with you, I know, but we need to settle this. I can send a car for you. I have a vacant apartment in Midtown. We can talk there. It's safe, I promise." 2 hours later, Marie walked into a minimalist apartment after leaving the twins with Miss Rosa. Paul was already there, appearing both exhausted and hyper-alert at the same time. "Coffee? Water?" he offered, his refined manners contrasting with the tension in his shoulders. "Just the truth," Marie answered, sitting on the couch. "You found her?" Paul nodded, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Marie's heart ache. "Sophie's in Paris. And you were right. About everything." Over the next 40 minutes, Paul recounted his conversation with Sophie. Every new revelation made Marie's emotions seesaw between empathy and fury. "Postpartum depression," she murmured when he mentioned Sophie's condition. As a mother, she could understand the despair, but as the woman who had found 2 babies in an alley, she could have asked for help. She could have... "I know," Paul interrupted softly. "Believe me, I've spent the past 48 hours oscillating between wanting to scream at her and trying to understand." "So now what?" Marie asked, the question hovering like a storm cloud. Paul stood and walked to the window, the view of the city fittingly grand for the weight of their decisions. "Now I want to meet my kids. I want to be part of their lives. I want to give them everything they deserve. A home, education, security." "They already have a mother," Marie said softly but firmly. Paul turned to face her. "I know. And I'm eternally grateful that you found them, that you loved them when they were abandoned. But you have to understand, they're my children too." "That you never looked for," Marie couldn't resist the jab. "Because I didn't know they existed," Paul snapped, then reined in his temper. "I'm sorry, it's just I'm trying to process having 2 4-year-olds I never knew about. While I was building my company, making millions, they were on the streets," Marie finished. "Yes, they were, and they survived, and they're happy, despite everything." A heavy silence fell. Through the window, they heard the distant hum of traffic, the city carrying on unawares. "I've already consulted some lawyers," Paul said at last. "It's complicated." Marie felt her blood run cold. "You're going to try to take them from me." "No," Paul responded quickly. "No, Look, legally I could. I'm their biological father. I have resources. I can prove I can give them a better life. But it would destroy them. To snatch them away from the only mother they've ever known. Throw them into a completely different world overnight. I can't do that." Marie exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So, what do you suggest?" "A gradual transition," Paul explained, sitting down again. "First, a modest apartment for you 3, nothing ostentatious. Then short visits, slowly getting to know each other. And the media. Can your lawyers keep it quiet?" Paul frowned. "It'll be difficult. People are already speculating about my sudden trips, my secretive meetings. Sooner or later it'll leak. And then they'll want to know why billionaire Paul Montenegro's kids were living on the streets," Marie said bitterly. "That's why we need to act fast," Paul insisted. "Not to hide, but to protect them. Set up a legal framework, prepare the ground." "A legal framework." Marie felt her dread return. "What kind of framework?" "One that protects everyone's rights. Mine as the biological father, yours as their de facto mother, and most of all, the twins' rights." Marie stood, needing to move around to think. What if it doesn't work? If they don't adapt, if they don't like me? Paul said gently, showing his own insecurity for the first time. "They already like you," Marie admitted. Ever since that day on the street, they haven't stopped talking about the man who looks like us." Paul felt tears burn his eyes. "Tell me about them," he said. "What are they like? What do they enjoy?" For an hour, Marie shared stories of the twins, how Thomas was the quieter one, always observing everything, how Lucas was naturally good with numbers, even without formal schooling, how inseparable they were, how they sometimes communicated without words. Paul soaked up every detail like a thirsty man in the desert, occasionally asking questions, his eyes lighting up whenever he discovered Thomas had his habit of frowning in concentration, or that Lucas gestured like him when excited. "We have to do this right," he finally said, "for their sake." Marie nodded. "But we need ground rules. First, nothing drastic happens without them understanding and agreeing. Second, major decisions are made jointly." "Agreed," Paul said immediately. "And third, they're always the priority. Not our egos, not the media, not appearances. Only what's best for them." "How do we tell them?" Marie asked, the question that had been haunting her the most. "Carefully," Paul replied. "Maybe with professional help. I know a great child psychologist." They spent the next hours drawing up a plan. Paul would handle the legal arrangements. Marie would emotionally prepare the twins. They'd find a suitable apartment and establish a gradual schedule of visits. "What about Sophie?" Marie finally asked. "Will she want to be involved?" Paul shook his head. "Not for now. She knows she forfeited that right. Maybe in the future, when the boys are older, they can decide if they want to meet her." As Marie prepared to leave, Paul stopped her. "Wait." He went to his office and returned with an envelope. "These are some photos from when they were newborns." Sophie kept them. Marie took the envelope with trembling hands. In 4 years, she had never seen her children as newborns. "You don't have to look now," Paul said kindly. "Take them home. See them when you're ready." Marie placed the envelope in her bag, her heart weighed down by the past colliding with the present. "Tomorrow I'll start the legal process," Paul informed her. "It'll take a few days to sort everything out. In the meantime, I take care of our kids," Marie finished, emphasizing "our" in a way that made Paul smile gratefully. She left the apartment carrying more than just an envelope of photos. She carried the weight of decisions that would forever change her little family's life. But for the first time since spotting Paul on that sidewalk, she felt that maybe, just maybe, things could turn out okay. The child psychologist, Dr. Ana Clara, was crystal clear in her recommendations. The setting for the big reveal should be somewhere familiar and comforting to the kids. That's why, against Paul's instincts to choose a more proper location, they decided on the park where the twins usually played. "It's their place," Marie explained when Paul expressed concern. "They feel safe there." It was a Saturday morning, the sun still timid in the New York sky. Thomas and Lucas were playing on the small playground, alternating between the swings and the seesaw, their laughter echoing in the nearly empty park. Marie watched her boys with her heart in her throat. Over the last 2 weeks since meeting with Paul, she had carefully prepared them, talking about different kinds of families, mentioning how some kids have more than one house, more than one set of parents. "Mommy," Thomas had asked one night, his brow furrowed in concentration, "why do some kids have 2 dads and we don't?" The question nearly broke her resolve to wait for the right moment. But Marie stuck to the plan outlined with Dr. Ana Clara. Now, watching Paul approach, Marie felt her stomach knot. He dressed intentionally casual, jeans and a simple t-shirt, trying not to look too out of place. "They seem happy today," Paul whispered, sitting next to Marie on a bench. "That's good, right?" Marie nodded, noticing how his hands shook slightly. It was odd seeing the powerful businessman so nervous. "Are you ready?" "No," he admitted with a small smile. "But I don't think I'll ever be truly ready." Following the psychologist's plan, Marie called the boys. "Thomas, Lucas, come here for a second, honey. Mom needs to talk to you about something important." The twins ran over but stopped short when they saw Paul. Their eyes widened in recognition. "It's the guy who looks like us," Lucas exclaimed, while Thomas studied Paul with his trademark quiet intensity. "Yes, my loves," Marie began, her voice trembling a little. You remember how we've been talking about different types of families? They nodded, sitting cross-legged on the grass in front of the bench. Lucas adopted the same lotus position Paul was in, another similarity that didn't go unnoticed by the adults. Well, something very special happened, Marie continued, sticking to the script they'd practiced. Remember how you always asked about your dad? Thomas immediately looked at Paul, his keen eyes connecting the dots faster than his brother. That's why he looks like us. Paul felt his heart skip a beat at the boy's perceptiveness. Yes, Thomas, Marie said softly. Paul, he's your father. Lucas jumped up, eyes wide. Like a real dad? Like Johnny's dad in the park? Yes, my love. A real dad. But why haven't you ever been with us before? Thomas asked Paul directly, his small voice carrying surprising maturity. Paul felt the weight of those missed years in that one question. Because I didn't know you existed, he answered truthfully. If I had known, I would have been here from day one. How didn't you know? Lucas asked, perplexed. Mom always knows where we are. Marie felt tears prick her eyes. It's different, my love. Sometimes things get complicated. But now you'll stay, Thomas asked, still staring at Paul. If you want me to, Paul replied, voice cracking with emotion. I really want to get to know you, be part of your life. But only if that's what you want. Lucas, ever impulsive, took a step forward. Do you have a house? I do, Paul said, a small smile forming. With a TV? Yes, with a TV. And a video game. Lucas, Marie scolded gently. But Paul laughed, a genuine sound that made the twins smile too. I have a video game, he confirmed. And a lot of other things we can explore together. But the most important thing is I want to know you, what you like, what you don't. Hear your stories. Thomas, who had remained thoughtful, finally spoke. Mom's still going to be our mom, right? Always, Paul and Marie answered in unison, exchanging a look of understanding. Your mom is the most important person in your lives, Paul continued. She's the one who's been with you all this time, who loves you more than anything. That never changes. The twins processed it for a moment, sharing that silent bond they often had. Can we go back to playing now? Lucas asked, seemingly satisfied for the moment. Sure, my love, Marie replied. But does anyone have more questions first? Thomas nodded. Will you live with us? No, son, Paul explained gently, but I found a nice apartment for you to live in with your mom. I'll visit as often as you like. Is there a playground nearby? Lucas asked, excitement returning to his voice. Yes, there is. Actually, Paul hesitated, looking at Marie, who encouraged him with a nod. How about we go see the apartment today? The boys jumped with excitement, but Thomas suddenly stopped. Can Miss Rosa come too? Marie's heart swelled with pride at her son's thoughtfulness. Of course, my love, Ms. Rosa is part of our family too. The rest of the morning felt like a strange and wonderful dream. Paul played with the twins at the playground, learning he shared Lucas's fear of heights and Thomas's love of building sand castles. Marie watched them, torn between joy and trepidation. After lunch, Paul had brought sandwiches and juice, nothing too different from what the twins were used to. They went to see the apartment. It was a modest 3-bedroom in a safe but not flashy neighborhood. Look, Mom, there's hot water in the shower, Lucas yelled from the bathroom, while Thomas methodically inspected each room. Can we have a bookshelf here? Thomas asked, pointing to an empty spot in the living room. Absolutely, Paul answered, exchanging an emotional look with Marie. We can pick out books together. The following weeks were a roller coaster of adjustments. Marie grappled with readapting to life with a fixed address, while Paul learned how to be a father step by step. There were tough moments. Lucas once burst into tears wanting to return to the park where they used to sleep, and Thomas refused to talk to Paul for 2 days after he was late for a promised outing. We can't force anything, Dr. Anna Clara reminded them. They need time to process all these changes. Their first major argument was about school. Paul wanted to enroll the twins immediately in a top private institution, while Marie insisted on a nearby public school. They need stability first, she argued. We can't throw them into an environment so different from anything they've known. But they need to catch up on their education, Paul countered, frustrated. They've already missed years of formal schooling. The argument intensified until they heard quiet sobs from the hallway. Thomas and Lucas were hugging each other, crying. "Don't fight," Lucas begged. "We promise we'll be good at school." Both adults felt their hearts break. "It's not your fault, my loves," Marie knelt to hug them. "Mommy and Paul are just talking because we want what's best for you. But the best is us all being together," Thomas said, wise beyond his years. Paul joined the group hug, swallowing his pride. "You're right, son. We'll do it your way, at your pace." Gradually, a new routine took shape. Paul visited nearly every day, usually in the late afternoon. They had dinner together, he helped with bath time, participated in story hour. Marie watched with a mixture of relief and fear as her sons thrived with their father's presence. Lucas inherited Paul's knack for technology, spending hours enthralled by educational games on his new tablet. Thomas, more reserved, opened up once he discovered Paul also enjoyed drawing. There were big milestones, like when the boys called Paul Dad for the first time during a trip to the zoo, or when Marie found a part-time job at a bookstore, slowly reclaiming her independence. There were challenges, too. The media began sniffing around the story, forcing Paul to tighten building security. Some neighbors made cruel remarks about the street mother who had trapped the businessman. "Ignore them," Paul would say whenever he saw Marie hurt by the gossip. "You're the best mother our children could have." The word "our" still felt strange, yet more and more genuine each day. A month after moving in during dinner, Lucas asked the question they all dreaded. Why didn't our other mom want us? The silence that followed was suffocating. Marie and Paul exchanged anguished looks. They had discussed with the psychologist how to handle this woes, but real life was harder than theory. Surprisingly, Thomas broke the silence. "It doesn't matter," he said, holding his brother's hand. "We have the best mom in the world, and now we have a dad too." Paul discreetly wiped away a tear. "Your brother's right, Lucas. Sometimes people make bad decisions, but it led us here to this family we're building." "A different family," Lucas commented thoughtfully. "Yes, my love," Marie smiled, her heart brimming with love. "Different, but very special." Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Marie and Paul sat on the small balcony of the apartment, talking. "They're amazing," Paul said, gazing at the city lights. "So resilient, so understanding." "They always have been," Marie replied softly. "Even on the worst nights on the streets, they'd find reasons to laugh." "You gave them that," Paul said, "that ability to find the good in everything. And now you're giving them the chance for a better future." They fell into a companionable silence, each wrapped in private thoughts. You know," Marie started hesitantly, "when I first saw you on that sidewalk, I was terrified. Terrified of losing them. Terrified you'd be an absent father. Terrified everything would go wrong. And now, she smiled, "I'm afraid of other things, but I also have hope. Lots of hope." Paul nodded. He understood perfectly. "A different family," he echoed Lucas's words. "But very special," Marie finished. Inside the apartment, Thomas and Lucas slept peacefully, their small faces relaxed. In their dreams, there were no complications about paternity or origins, no worries about past or future. There was only love, different, complex but real, surrounding them, keeping them safe and happy in their new home. It was hard to believe a single year had passed since that fateful afternoon on Fifth Avenue. Now, Paul's backyard was decorated for the twins' 5th birthday party, colorful balloons dancing in the gentle New York breeze. A homemade banner, created by the boys themselves, proclaimed, "Best family in the world." Marie straightened the dessert table, smiling at her reflection in the window. The uniform of the New Beginnings non-profit, where she now worked as project coordinator, had replaced the worn-out clothes of her homeless days. But more than external change, her calm, confident gaze showed an inner transformation. Serenity, confidence, peace. "Mom," Lucas ran over, his little bow tie crooked from all the playing. "Dad said he has a special surprise." Paul appeared just behind him, carrying Thomas on his shoulders. "Hey, it was supposed to be a secret." The year had been full of adaptation and discovery. Marie found her calling by helping others on the streets, using her own experience to develop effective social reintegration programs. Paul, moved by her reality, redirected significant resources to social causes and created a foundation that had already pulled hundreds of families off the streets. "Guests are arriving," Marie announced, watching the first cars pull up to the gate. The guest list perfectly reflected their new reality. Executives in expensive suits, mixing with formerly homeless families Marie had helped, children from the public school the twins attended, alongside kids from the city's elite. Miss Rosa, of course, held a place of honor as their honorary grandmother. Now living in a small apartment Paul had provided, she remained a constant presence in the boys' lives. "They've grown so much," the older woman commented, watching the twins run around with other children, "and they're so happy." Marie nodded, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Thomas and Lucas had thrived over the past year. School was going well. They took swimming and music lessons, and they had friends. But most importantly, they had kept the sweetness and empathy they had gained during their years on the streets. "Cake time," Paul called, gathering everyone around the main table. That was when Marie saw her, Sophie, standing discreetly in a corner of the yard. The invitation had been a joint decision, carefully discussed with the children's psychologist. After a year of intensive therapy and a consistent demonstration of remorse and recovery, everyone agreed it was time. The twins, who had been gently introduced to her existence, had been prepared for the meeting. Still, the moment was charged with emotion. "Kids," Paul said gently, "remember we mentioned a special person coming today?" Thomas and Lucas looked curiously at Sophie. There was no anger in their eyes, only the innocent curiosity of children. "Are you our other mom?" Lucas asked directly, making Sophie swallow hard. "Yes," she managed, her voice trembling. "And I'm so happy to finally meet you." "Mom said you were sick when we were born," Thomas commented, surprising everyone with his understanding tone. Sophie knelt to their level, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Yes, I was, a sickness of the heart and mind, but I'm better now, and I wanted to tell you how sorry I am." "It's okay," Lucas interrupted with a shrug. "We have the best mom ever, and now we have the best dad too." Marie felt tears in her own eyes as she saw Sophie nod, accepting her secondary role in their lives with a mixture of sorrow and relief. "Time for happy birthday," someone announced, breaking the heavy moment. The twins raced to stand by the cake, an impressive two-tier creation decorated with their favorite characters. Paul and Marie stood behind them, each placing a hand on a child's shoulder. "Make a wish," Paul encouraged as the candles were lit. "No need," Thomas said with a smile. "We already have everything we wanted." Lucas nodded enthusiastically. The best different family in the world. While everyone sang happy birthday, Marie glanced around the yard. All the people who had shaped their story were there. Ms. Rosa, who had never given up on them. Friends Marie made at the non-profit. Paul, who had become not only a devoted father, but also a respectful partner in raising the boys. Even Sophie, who was fighting to atone for her past mistakes. Later, when the party started winding down, Marie found Paul watching the twins play in the pool. "What are you thinking?" she asked, stopping beside him. "About how unpredictable life is," he replied. "A year ago, I was just a businessman focused on profits and numbers. Now," he gestured at the scene before them, "now I have a family, one very different from anything I ever imagined, but perfect in its own way." Marie smiled in understanding. Her own journey had been equally transformative, from a high-powered marketing executive to a homeless woman, and then to the fulfilled mother and professional she was today. "You know what makes me proudest?" she said, watching Thomas help a younger child in the pool, while Lucas shared his new toys with others. They didn't lose the compassion they learned on the streets. They still care about others, still see beyond appearances. "That's your doing," Paul said. "You taught them what really matters in life." The sun was starting to set over New York, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. In the yard, children still laughed and played, while adults gathered in small groups, and a sense of peace hovered in the air. Sophie approached to say goodbye, her eyes red but bearing a small, grateful smile. "You've done an incredible job with them," she said sincerely. They're wonderful kids. You're always welcome to visit, Marie offered, surprising even herself with the sincerity of her words. When you're ready. When they're ready. Sophie nodded in gratitude before leaving, carrying away a slightly lighter burden of regret. Evening fell softly over the party. The last guests said their goodbyes, leaving just the closest members of the family. Bath time, kids, Marie called, prompting moans of protest from the twins. Just 5 more minutes, please, Lucas pleaded. We promise we won't take long, Thomas bargained. Paul and Marie exchanged amused smiles. 3 minutes, they said in unison. Watching their children relish the final moments of the party, Marie felt a deep sense of completion. Their family might not be conventional, might have been forged through pain and loss, but it was real, it was strong, it was theirs. In the end, Paul whispered, as if reading her mind. Everything fell into place just the way it was meant to. Marie nodded, gathering the boys in a hug as they came out of the pool. Wrapped in soft towels, all 4 of them squished together in a group hug, their laughter echoing across the now quiet yard. The future would doubtless bring more challenges, but right then, in that perfect moment, Marie knew they had found something precious. Not just a happy ending, but a new beginning, overflowing with hope, love, and limitless possibilities.